across this one recently, sourcing vintage guitars for Nick's Handpicked, and it totally stood out for its look. Now, this might just be my preference, but I love a gold top. And a gold top with body checking is just something that, it's my hands down favorite. So as soon as I saw the body checking, that was the initial thing that stood out to me. This guitar is from 1973, and 70s Gibsons are kind of notorious for being an era where maybe the highest quality Gibson guitars were not coming out of the factory. Now 40 plus years later, these guitars have become, just like any other Gibson, very collectible and unique based off of what Gibson was doing at that time. So above all else, the early 70s at Gibson was a transition era. These guitars featured mini humbucker pickups, a pancake mahogany body, a 3-piece maple neck, and a bit of a lighter gold finish compared to, say, 50s Gibsons. The mini humbucker pickups are tighter, they're snappier, they do that twang, that snap thing that PAF's full-size humbuckers from Gibson, in my experience, don't really do. On top of that, definitely has a unique look, being the smaller mini humbucker. Not everybody's preference, but I think it looks cool. So that's great. I have a cool Les Paul. I love the look, I love the vintage character, it sounds great. But then I started diving into this guitar itself. And the first thing that stood out to me where somebody's name was spray painted onto the case of the guitar. You have a J.Bohl, a J Bohl. So after digging, looking up the serial number, this guitar is a factory second, so there's a 2 at the top of the headstock, meaning that from the factory in the 70s, this guitar would have had some sort of blemish, some sort of finish error that Gibson went back and redid, but they marked that as a factory second so everybody knows that this was one that came out of the factory a little bit not just in pristine condition like their normal Gibsons. Now that doesn't mean it's a bad guitar. In fact, it opens up the door for maybe different people to obtain this guitar for maybe something like a cheaper price point, or most importantly, people might be sleeping on this one. So the same thing I discovered when I picked it up, oh, it's a factory second, maybe there's something internally, or maybe it's a lemon, right? Not the case. This thing sounds great. And sometimes those factory seconds are the secret guitars that people are like, wait, how'd you find that one? Just a little tidbit when you're out there hunting vintage guitars for yourself. So based on doing research, looking up YouTube videos, diving into the Googles of the world, I was able to finally discover who owned this guitar. This Les Paul Deluxe used to be owned by Premier Guitars' John Bollinger. You probably recognize John from the Rig Rundown series. I know I've watched countless videos of all my favorite players going over their gear, showing us how they make their noise and get that sound that makes them famous. And John does a phenomenal job at bringing the energy and making it a fun environment for the viewers at home. John has literally done some of the most premier, not even joking, premier guitar, but has done some of the most premier rig rundowns available on the web today. So it's really, really special for me that this guitar ended up in my hands. I don't know John, I'd love to meet him someday, but that this guitar ended up in my hands and I get to cherish it and then hopefully translate that message and that story onto the next owner, that's what it's all about for me. Regardless of the history and who owned this guitar, this Les Paul Deluxe carries a ton of mojo, a ton of vintage vibe, and it's honestly one of my favorite 70s Les Pauls that I've gotten to experience. There's honest playwear throughout. I noticed that there was a headstock break somewhere way back when, but it's rock solid and all part of the integrity of the guitar at this point. And then it sounds great. I'm going to plug it in. We're going to do a clean sample. We're going to go through the bridge and the neck pickup, and I'm going to give a little meat on the bones to show you kind of what this sounds like from a rock and roll setting, adding a little more overdrive and distortion to the back end. Final thoughts on the 73 Les Paul Deluxe. It's a sweet guitar, has a ton of its own character. But for me, it's always cool when a guitar tells a little bit of its own story, and even cooler when it connects back to somebody who's been in the gear game for decades. Thanks so much for checking it out and watching this video. Full details and specs and photos are over on our website. This guitar could be yours. Go check it out. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And hey, tell me your favorite guitar story or the most random thing that's happened collecting, hunting down, or finding vintage guitars down in the comments below. Love to hear from you. More videos coming out soon. We'll dive into more vintage guitar stories and keep digging. We're like the guitar detectives over here. So thanks so much for checking out. If you like this video, subscribe, follow along. Way more vintage guitar stories to come. And I hope to start bringing you along on the physical hunt as we start getting more and more involved in the vintage guitar world. Have a great day.